My kids still say it, so I don't know where it comes from because I'm not intending to teach it to them, but it still comes out. My brother made me mad.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
He made me mad. It says that somebody else is responsible for my emotions. When I first heard that nobody else can make you feel anything, I wanted to punch somebody. I wanted to say, no, that's not true. They did something, and I'm mad because they did something. My feelings are because somebody else did something I didn't like. And how can you say that I get to choose because they did that to me, and that's why I feel mad? Realizing that actually I get to choose how I respond to any situation. So it feels automatic, but really we're the ones that determine our emotions. And one thing I've actually been learning more recently, I've been noticing in different situations in my life here that certain things cause me to have a certain emotion or a certain feeling. And I hadn't thought about it that much before, but realizing not everybody reacts to that particular situation or maybe what somebody says the same way that I do.
Right.
So if I'm having a certain emotion in response to something somebody said that I work with or a situation with them, it actually has more to do with me and why that elicited a certain response in me. That is another kind of switch in thinking to realize, oh, I am, again, the one that's responsible. I'm the one having the emotions. I'm the one that needs to figure out why I'm having those emotions and what I want to do about it or how I want to respond. And I should say that anger, even though it's difficult for me, is not bad. Other people have different relationships to the emotion of anger. When we see injustice or things like that and we get angry about it, that's not a bad emotion. In fact, we should probably say none of the emotions you have are bad. They're just your response to stimulus.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say. I actually had a whole conversation this past week with some folks about this whole idea of do we actually choose our emotions, or are we just responding, and that whole gray area. Yeah, I just think it is important to say that no one's saying it's bad. It's just you, but you are choosing.
Yeah, and I think it helps when it's your choice and your responsibility, even though you may have a harder time responding differently, or you have certain ways of responding to certain things or certain things people say or whatever. When you have a choice, now you can do something about it. You're no longer stuck. When we insist on saying somebody made me feel any certain way, then we're putting our emotions in the hands of other people, then we can't do anything about it.
Right.
And that's just not true. And I should say, we should maybe also mention, maybe we should have a whole podcast, a whole episode just on feelings.
Yeah.
I think we probably could easily. That the positive emotions are the same problem, right? If I say my partner makes me feel happy or good about my life, then you're also putting all of your emotional eggs in the basket of this other person. And that's not good either. I'm not a psychologist or therapist, but I'm pretty sure that's called codependency. Back me up.
Yes.
Back me up, my also non-expert friend.
Yes, and it's also right. But so it's okay to say things like, I feel happy when my partner does this, but not my partner makes me happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it's a nuanced kind of language thing, but it communicates a lot.
Okay, I guess we should move to the next step.
Needs. Okay, so this is fun. I also struggle to know what my needs are, so I've had to work at this one. It may seem obvious, but I think the needs, is probably the biggest part of this whole nonviolent communication thing, is that we and our shared humanity all have needs, just as you said at the beginning. So, what I may need from this interaction may not be what that other person needs. But if we can name them and state them, then, that's just a point of connection. And I think really is the thing that can help us move forward in a way that is peaceful, because we have an opportunity to recognize that each of us is really in this because we have a need that is unmet. So in nonviolent communication, of course, we're kind of we're naming our core values, our longings, and that really helps us understand one another deeply. And we can then respond. We have the opportunity to respond in a way that could possibly meet this need that this person has, instead of having to guess at it. Although that's part of it too, right? There's this other piece of nonviolent communication where you can kind of ask, you can help this. And I do this a lot with my kids. I can say, I see that you pounded your fist on the table. Are you feeling this because you need this? And so kind of helping them know what their own needs are and helping them find words for what they are.
When you name needs for people, even if you're just guessing or you're asking, is this what you need? I noticed that too with my kids, especially with my 6-year-old. When I say, are you needing to have some more choices or be able to make some decisions for yourself or do it on your own? For kids that are growing up, that's a huge need, as they want more and more autonomy to be able to do their things for themselves and choose their own adventure. And if I name that and then they say yes, then all of a sudden their needs have been acknowledged and validated. And I might still ask them to do something different and explain why that's not going to work right now, or I don't know, any number of things. But acknowledging someone's needs changes the whole conversation. There's also a list of needs that is also helpful, I think, because sometimes we aren't able to name these things.
Right. It's easier to kind of name the ones that have to do with how we are physically, right? Like I get very emotional when I'm hungry and my blood sugars aren't regulated and I am very unpleasant. Right. So it's easy for me to be, I feel angry because I'm hungry, but it's harder for me to really name, I'm feeling like I've been excluded, or I need to feel included, or I need deeper intimacy, or I need affection. Those are harder for me to really pinpoint.
This is so hard because when we're actually expressing our needs and not covering them up with other language or other things, it makes us really vulnerable to tell people, I feel lonely, I need more time with you or whatever. That's hard to say. And we have to remember that, you and I maybe have been working on some of this stuff for a while and have made progress, but it's still hard for us. It's still being vulnerable is always difficult. I think we get better at it the more we're willing to do it, to risk, and especially having partners and families that respond positively.
Right. I just was thinking here, it's harder for me to do that sort of thing and to have that level of vulnerability with people who don't reciprocate that same level of vulnerability towards me. However, when I am willing to take the risk and be vulnerable like that, I just think that just fosters, even if that's something that they don't reciprocate as much, it's a model for them to consider that possibility. And I think it just, encourages more vulnerability, even though with those people, it's harder to take the initial risk.
Yeah, it changes the air in the room. When you're having a difficult conversation, when you are willing to share something more vulnerable. I remember one time I don't remember what was happening, but I felt really angry. Again, that's like my basic emotion, apparently. I felt really angry about something. I was stuck. I couldn't let it go. I was so mad at my wife. I somehow had the self-awareness and wherewithal, probably for the first time in my life, to say, I feel so angry and I have no idea why. And just to admit that I really didn't know. When I tried to think about it and tried to figure out I didn't have a needs list in front of me, but I was willing to admit, I do feel really angry. I'm actually not really sure why. I'm usually really good at making up reasons, and that
sure.
is, a gift of mine that doesn't actually help me all that much. But being able to express your feeling and then say, oh, I don't know why, then you can have room to start maybe looking at a list or thinking about it and seeing, well, what is the need? What triggered my feeling? And then what's the need then behind that feeling? So some of the needs on this list, we mentioned autonomy, getting to make choices, I think is a huge one. Celebration, that's not something we normally think of as a need, but...
Oh, well, that's like the number one need for me. I was an Enneagram 3. Tell me how awesome I am. Celebrate me. I'm kind of being a little bit facetious, but yeah, I actually, that one resonates with me.
I love parties and getting together to celebrate different things, but it's probably a lot different than your need for celebration. My father-in-law passed away this last year, and this weekend, actually, my wife's family went to this lake where they often went camping and scattered his ashes in the lake. We were really sad about not being able to be there.
Right.
But we were communicating with them, and we, had kind of worked through it, and were able actually through a video call to be present and be part of that celebration. This one, because it mentions losses as well as celebrating achievements or different milestones in life. That's also celebration, and remembering people is important. And that can be a need that some people don't get met because of maybe we have your family or the people you're around have ideas about what's okay and not okay in mourning, and then you never get that need met to really mourn well and celebrate that person's life and remember them well, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that gets really, really sticky because, our emotions are so heightened and so raw and so many things in times of grief that, I just feel like it's all bets are off, right? Like there's no rule. And because everybody's doing it so differently. And that seems like an especially difficult place to try and navigate this. Okay, we all have needs. How are they being unmet? How can we help meet them when they're,
It raises this whole idea that a lot of times our conflicts are about competing needs, probably. Yes. One person has a need for one thing. This is probably the ongoing conflict in my marriage relationship is over particular needs that we have that are typically in conflict. Some of the other needs, integrity, so finding meaning in life, self-worth, interdependence, so belonging to a community, finding acceptance, having emotional safety, that seems huge. There's obviously physical needs, and that's important because if your need for physical safety, security is not being met, then you're going to respond in certain ways, and you need to be able to articulate those things. We also have the need for play. I think that's important. The need for respect, support, trust, a lot of those things. When those needs aren't being met, we act certain ways, right?
Right.
So those are things we can see in our kids when for some reason they can't trust us. I think of all of these YouTube videos of parents giving kids like these fake Christmas presents or some of playing pranks on their kids. And there's a part of me that thinks that's super funny and really hilarious. And I don't want to be too self-righteous about it, but I do see that really causes some trauma to those kids.
Yeah, well, one day our then 4-year-old, who's now almost 11, said to her dad, who does really like to joke around, said, "I don't like jokes, and please don't joke me until I die." So this is like her 4-year-old way of saying, please stop joking around with me. I actually don't like that. I have a need for these, in her way, like I have a need to interact with you in this kind of way. And this way is not it. Yeah. And so it's interesting though, because part of his need is a need for a certain type of play. It's like competing needs. And so them working that out and finding points of connection outside of respecting that in one another, and then finding other points of connection has been really cool to watch over the years, because he has maintained a real deep respect for that in her. And I find him